The Magnificent Battle, Merlin, Arthur's Court, and the Mistress of Time, Chapter 13. Is this the end? The dragon was getting closer. It was horrible beyond description, though King Arthur, who had recently seen it, and the common people of the realm could describe it in detail. Somehow it appeared to combine reptilian and mammalian characteristics. Its movement was fluid and agile, though it occasionally seemed to stumble on those small, deer-like feet. Something that big seemed to need bigger feet to keep it from sinking in the mud, something like the feet of an elephant. Krysta could not help but sneak a peek as the beast slowly crossed the field toward the rock outcropping that barely concealed the frightened girl's smoke coming from its serpentine nostrils and wafting into the air. Closer and closer it came, until it was little more than 50 feet away, then 40, then 30, then 20. By then, since it was quite tall, it could easily look down between the rocks and see the yellow and green-clad girls who, by this time, were quivering with fear. Even with closed eyes, the girls knew that the beast was nearly on them. There was a constant, frightening noise coming from it. Ashur turned to Krysta and whispered, "I think this is the end for the two of us." Krysta replied, "Is that what our grandpa means by going out with a blaze of glory?" "I don't know, but I sure don't see the glory," Ashur lamented. By this time, the dragon was looking down and began turning its serpent's head from side to side as it looked at the girls, like a dog turning its head to try to understand something it can't quite figure out. First, it looked out of one eye. Then it turned its awful head to look with the other. "What is it doing?" Krysta asked Ashur. "I don't know," Ashur trembled, "but why don't we just be quiet and still? Maybe it can't see us if we don't move." Well, the girls were now immobilized by fear. The dragon was surprised by what he saw. Two fair maidens lying in rocks in a field. He had never seen anything like that, and they certainly didn't smell like any fair maidens he had ever smelled before. Given bathing habits and cold weather, the fair maidens of this time didn't smell nearly as good as these. Their trail smelled sweet and of things that didn't exist in his time. He was wondering about all this when he caught a glimpse of Ashur's face. We all know the stories of those naive knights who are smitten with passionate love by simply a passing view of a fair maiden from a castle window, how they would go to the ends of the earth for their beloved, how they would fight giants, armies of knights, or enter haunted castles simply for the possibility of seeing their beloved's face. Well, so the dragon was smitten. Not that his brain was all that large, but all the processing power of it was consumed at one look. Though the mental processing was in the language of dragons, in English it would roughly translate, "This damoiselle is so fair." The thought cracked like thunder through his reptilian cranium. "This damoiselle is so different from the others," another dragon thought rolled through. Then the emotional dam of loneliness broke within his heart, releasing a torrent of emotion. Not taking his eyes off of Ashur even to look at Krysta, he thought, or perhaps he hoped, that he saw something in her eyes beyond just beauty. He sensed, or he hoped, that this fair damoiselle could see in him more than his appearance, but the love he had in his heart, the devotion he wished to lavish on one who could have compassion for him, someone with the insight and maturity to recognize that he would be true to her forever. Is this the one? His dragon mind wondered. He stared down in disbelief at Ashur and thought how to communicate his love to her. If this is difficult to envision, Think of a rhinoceros at the zoo trying to communicate his love to the attractive young intern. This is one tough communication problem, but one that Gladysant the dragon wanted to solve. He started with sitting and trying to look less frightening. Seeing that Ashur only looked with terror in her eyes, he realized that was not working. So he tried moving from side to side. That didn't work either. So he walked around the rock with a kind of rhythmic motion, almost as if dancing, as if dragons could dance. He looked again and saw only the same terror. How can I let her know of my love? He thought in dragon. I know. I can show her how powerful I am. As a show of masculine strength, he raised his head to the sky and blew a tremendous billow of fire through his nostrils. Flames shot into the clear blue sky, and the smoke lingered in the air like after 4th of July fireworks. Surely that would be impressive, he thought to himself. But a look into Ashur's eyes revealed only a white-faced appearance of horror. All this is what modern biologists would call courtship behavior. The girls, if they could have spoken, would have called it terror. While this courtship display behavior was taking place, Krysta was looking for a way to escape. It was then that Krysta saw what looked like a man wearing a full-length blue robe with some kind of white spirals on it. He was about 100 feet away, just inside the woods. "Help, mister!" Krysta called. The man stood very still. "Mister, can't you see we're in trouble? We need help!" Krysta called again. The man said nothing, but turned and walked away, being absolutely convinced that death, or worse, was imminent for those two. Krysta noticed that the spirals around his cape seemed to look like snakes. "A lot of help that guy was," she said with disgust. "We're about to be eaten by a dragon, and he just walks away." "Forget about him," Ashur said. "Just hide down here and be still. Maybe if you don't move, the dragon won't be able to see us." That was entirely too passive an approach for Krysta. She thought about it a minute and said, "Nope, I'm not going to just lie here and get barbecued and eaten like a chicken leg. And who knows, maybe an impossible, imaginary beast with preposterous fire-breathing nostrils." She didn't quite know what else she was thinking. "If it can breathe fire, perhaps it can understand some kind of communication." Though the connection between those two things was anything but clear. With that, she jumped up from where she was lying in the rocks and began to speak to the dragon in a loud voice. "Hello, Mr. Dragon," she began. I guess you are a mister, but you may be a Mrs. Dragon, but it doesn't really matter. The Mr. or Mrs. part, well, it may matter to you, but not to us, I think. The important thing is the dragon, isn't it?" she said, raising her hands as if in greeting in the expansive style of her grandfather. Gladysant paused as he saw the face of this other fair damoiselle. It was just as fair, but the poison-tipped arrow of love had already pierced his heart. It was Ashur he loved, but the other fair maiden was wonderful as well. Ashur shuddered and prepared for the worst. Krysta continued her introduction. "We are two visitors to your land. We don't quite know how we got here. In fact, we don't know where here is, but we are enjoying your beautiful world." Gesturing wildly as she spoke, she continued. "Most of us, we are fascinated and incredibly surprised to meet with you." Krysta's brain was working so fast that it was hard to decide which line of thought to speak, but after a moment's hesitation she did. "And we are most honored to meet something that we, that is, people of our time, thought was only imaginary, a fire-breathing dragon." Krysta smiled at the dragon. Both Krysta and her cousin were lovely girls and possessed beautiful smiles. Gladysant was overcome. The dragon stood absolutely still. A few small licks of flame issued from the mouth of the vaporous face and rose, trickling into dark smoke that dissipated into the air above. Not that he understood a single word, but the voice, the smile, the gestures seemed to connect to something inside that reptilian brain. It is well known that words are not necessary for the communication of love. Ashur noticed that the dragon seemed to hesitate. Go on, whispered Ashur to Krysta. At least he hasn't eaten us yet. Keep talking. Krista's brain was racing at light speed and bubbling over with ideas. We are the luckiest people ever to come from our time. The only people who claim to have seen dragons are people with, mental problems. You know how those are, don't you? Are there dragons with mental problems? She laughed, a weak and unconvincing laugh. Oh, gosh, Ashur sighed, deciding that hope was definitely lost. If that dragon understands what you're saying, we are barbecue. Krysta was undaunted. You see, where we come from, other people think that dragons are just something people dream up in nightmares. Dreams. Not that we think that dragons are bad dreams. Not that at all. Krysta laughed, a really phony laugh. It's that they symbolize all the things we fear, snakes, falling off cliffs, being run over by giant slugs. Ashur had had enough. Can't you think of anything else? At least he hasn't eaten us yet, Krysta responded with annoyance, feeling that she was not appreciated for the few more seconds of life she had gained for them. She continued, We can go back to our time and tell people how wonderful you are, how lovely your snake-like head is, about your fabulous breath. I'll bet you would be a big hit at a 4th of July picnic. Once again, Krysta laughed, a very unconvincing laugh. So, if you will be so kind as to allow us to continue on our way, now that we have seen you, we really need to be going. If you will excuse us. The dragon looked perplexed, as if he didn't quite know what to do, which he didn't. The girls assumed that probably he was thinking that they would make a tasty meal. Perhaps he was thinking of the best way to cook them, though roasting was an obvious choice. Perhaps he was thinking... Well, perhaps he wasn't thinking at all. The girls couldn't tell. But if he were not thinking, the girls were. How many barbecue sandwiches do you think he can make out of us? Ashur asked Krysta in despair. Krysta replied, Come on, I've said we're leaving. Maybe he'll let us go. Ashur stood up and decided that leaving was the best option she knew of. The girls jumped off the rocks and began to walk away toward the woods. Gladysant could not allow his newly found love to leave. Suddenly they became aware of that courtship behavior stuff again. As a terrific roar and blast of fire blew over their heads, the girls stopped in their tracks. I think he doesn't want us to leave, Krysta concluded the obvious. Yes, but what do we do now? Ashur asked. More of the same, Krysta responded. I'll try talking to him some more. She turned to the dragon. Oh, Mr. Dragon, that was just fantastic. You are truly remarkable. I can't wait to tell all my friends in school about you. That ball of fire was so impressive. It is amazing how you can breathe fire for such a great distance. And that roar, wow! That was enough to scare the bejeebies out of anyone. You are indeed the most fearsome and wonderful and amazing dragon we've ever heard of. Gladysant stopped breathing fire and stood motionlessly. Once again, he was trying to get his befuddled brain to figure out how to communicate his love. He seems to be interested in being talked to. He seems to like it, Ashur said, with urgency in her voice. Gladysant stretched out his long, serpentine neck and moved his head to get a closer look at Ashur. Don't act scared, Krysta said in a low voice to Ashur. They say that horses can tell if you're scared of them. Maybe he can too. Maybe if we don't act that way, he'll go away. Great idea. That's almost as helpful as telling me to rub his tummy, Ashur said mockingly. And just how do you suggest that I not act scared? I don't know, Krysta replied. But if you can reach his tummy, give it a try. Ashur's terrified eyes flashed with anger. Grabbing for ideas, Krysta said, Try singing a song. Ashur hesitated. Then, as ridiculous as it seemed, she thought she would try it. It beat the tummy-rubbing idea. She started out with the first thing she could think of, a verse of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Then, in desperation, she began singing all the verses that she knew of Rocky Top. That voice, that lovely voice, Gladyson's infatuation only grew with hearing Ashur sing. On Ashur's side, she realized how meaningful those words were when she sang, "I wish that I was on old Rocky Top down in the Tennessee hills." She really wished it now. It was when she got to the "woo" that Krysta joined in. Gladys turned his head as if to listen. "Ain't no smoggy smoke on Rocky Top. Ain't no telephone bills." Krysta followed Ashur's lead, as Ashur had sung the song many times in the Tennessee football stadium with her dad and mom. She sure wished she were there now. "All I know is it's a pity life can't be simple again." The girls got to the end and started over, this time clapping their hands and dancing a bit. Then a few cheerleader moves made their way into their repertoire. Gladys had never seen fair maidens doing cheerleader moves. He marveled at Ashur's grace. This undoubtedly was beauty beyond his dragon imagination. Then Gladys began moving his head from side to side in something that approximated rhythm. "Don't stop," Krysta said to Ashur after the next verse of Rocky Top, Tennessee. They sang and they danced, and they danced and they sang. Between verses, Ashur said to Krysta, "They sing this all the time at the Tennessee ball games, but not even the craziest fans sing it this much." "I don't care how many times they can sing it," Krysta responded. "The question is how many times we can sing Rocky Top."